The war in the Ukraine is going to have a devastating effect on the Russian economy, a mildly negative effect on the European economy going out for a decade, and a mild, even milder than European effect on the U.S. and global economy in the coming decade. I'm Dr. Bill Connerly. I connect the dots between the economy and business. This economic forecast of the effects of the Ukraine war is based on an assumption that it does not get to the nuclear point, and it's also based on the assumption that we're not going to go back into the situation we were at before the invasion. There are going to be lasting consequences. I'm not a geopolitical expert. Those are just assumptions that I'm going to use in the forecast. The forecast for Russia is very harsh because I believe that even if a truce is signed and sanctions are reduced, Russia will be a pariah in the global business community, and that's going to have widespread, devastating impacts on them. Let's begin with energy. In order for Russia to continue to be a great energy producer, they need to do fracking of shale deposits, and they need to develop resources in difficult situations, such as Siberia. I think the Russians are okay in easy cases, but for these more difficult cases, they need Western technology. It is difficult for them to purchase it outright, so they do joint ventures with American companies and maybe some other Western companies. But who is going to want to do a joint venture after many Western companies have had to write off their investments? So I believe joint venturing, partnering is not going to work. Russia is going to be on its own for developing its energy in the future. And without continued development, production will decline over time. That's the nature of the oil industry. And it's also going to be true, I think, of minerals and fertilizer and other things. So Russia is going to be in a tough spot because energy is such a vital part of their total earnings. There are some Russian manufacturing companies. They will be shunned as suppliers by Western companies because one of the things you need in a supplier is reliability. They will not be viewed as reliable. Within the Russian economy, there is production for local, that is domestic customers, but even that is difficult. So Russia makes tractors. I went looking online for the top Russian-made tractors and looked at them, and I'm seeing engines from Mercedes and Cummins, hydraulics from Bosch, axles from Dana. So Russian tractor companies are using a lot of Western-made products, and if they use those products, they're not sure that they're going to be able to get replacement parts, repair parts. So they will have to increasingly go domestic. So Russia does produce diesel engines and transmissions. They can make their own tractor from start to finish, but it's going to be more difficult for them. The quality will probably go down and the price will probably go up. And we're not just talking about tractors, though agriculture is an important part of the total Russian economy. What about computers and machinery, equipment for everyday small businesses scattered across Russia? Those companies are going to be hesitant to buy Western products if they're dependent on repair and replacement parts from the West. So this deglobalization of the Russian economy will have negative consequences for a decade or so. And it's going to be very harsh on the Russian economy. The Russian people will be poorer almost across the board in the Russian economy. Let's turn now to Europe. Europe will feel consequences much milder than Russia, but definitely negative. For one thing, Europe is going to spend more on defense than they've been spending. They've been slapped in the face, not as badly as Ukraine, but slapped enough that they are going to want to beef up their spending. Maybe they should have been doing it all along, but as a forecaster, I'm saying, okay, they're going to be laying out money without getting an increase in the productive capacity of Europe. So that's going to be a hit towards economic growth in the years to come. Europe will also be paying more for energy. Some of that is they will be weaning themselves off of Russian energy, but also that Russian energy is going to be less and less available, and global oil prices are going up. Europe will also bear the brunt of the humanitarian burden for the people displaced from Ukraine, both those displaced from their homes inside Ukraine as well as those who are refugees in other countries. That will be a small effect, but it will be negative for the European economy for a few years to come. So Europe, a minor negative, long-lasting for a decade or more because of this conflict. For the United States and the global economy, the effects will be similar with higher oil prices. And when I say higher oil prices, I mean higher than they would have been without this conflict. I think oil prices will go down if we can get a treaty that the Western powers accept as a legitimate agreement between Ukraine, independent Ukraine, and Russia. With the sanctions being reduced, then Russian production goes into the world economy. But it's going to be lower, Russian production, so there will be higher energy prices than we otherwise would have, though the very high prices we're experiencing today will come down with the treaty. The other thing that will affect the U.S. and the world is this is another hit on globalization of supply chains. So when globalized supply chains work well, they work well. They bring down costs and they enable just-in-time activity. But when they don't work well, we saw what happened with the Japanese tsunami. We saw what happened with the floods in Thailand. And then the pandemic taught us that supply chains are a critical part of the world economy, and the Russian events taught us even more. And even though neither Russia nor Ukraine are large manufacturers, they do sell some stuff to Western countries, and that became an unreliable supply chain. So I think all around the world, companies are going to be shortening their supply chain, domesticating, deglobalizing their supply chains. Not wholesale, but whenever they have a choice, this part, about the same quality, about the same price, they're going to go local. So in the big picture, Russia is hurt very harshly. Europe is hurt a little bit. The U.S. and the global economy is hurt even less than Europe. And this all sounds negative, but let me put this in broader perspective. Steven Pinker wrote a book a few years ago called The Better Angels of Our Nature. And he documented a long-term trend toward fewer wars, less murder, less conflict. The Ukraine war is definitely a setback in this regard. However, I think it's going to be just a temporary setback on a trend towards less war, because around the world, political leaders are looking at Russia, and they will see the devastation to the Russian economy from their adventure in Ukraine. And I believe that many country leaders around the world will be very hesitant to invade their neighbors after this event. I'm Dr. Bill Connerly. I connect the dots between the economy and business. I'd love to share with you my newsletter every month. You can subscribe to it by texting the word econ to 42828.